History is filled with fascinating stories, but sometimes the tales we think we know best are actually far from the truth. Today, we are diving into 7 historical myths that have been widely believed but aren't quite as accurate as you might think. The Emancipation Proclamation freed all slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, is often celebrated as the document that freed all slaves in the United States. However, the reality is more complex. The proclamation declared that all slaves in Confederate states in rebellion against the Union were to be freed. But it did not apply to slaveholding border states that had not seceded, nor to parts of the Confederacy already under Union control. In other words, it only applied to areas where the Union had no power to enforce it at the time. Full abolition of slavery in the United States didn't actually occur until the 13th Amendment was ratified in December 1865. Napoleon was extremely short. Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous French military leader, is often remembered for his supposed short stature. So much so that the term Napoleon complex has become synonymous with short men overcompensating for their height. However, Napoleon wasn't particularly short for his time. He stood around 5'6" to 5'7", which was the average height for a Frenchman in the early 19th century. The myth of his shortness likely arose due to a mix-up between French and British units of measurement and perhaps as a form of British propaganda to diminish his image. George Washington had wooden teeth. George Washington, the first president of the United States, is often said to have had wooden teeth. This image of the stoic founding father with splintery wooden dentures is widely accepted, but it's far from true. Washington did suffer from dental problems and wore dentures, but they were made from a combination of materials, including human and animal teeth, ivory, and metal. The myth of wooden teeth may have arisen from the fact that his dentures were stained and discolored over time, giving them a wooden appearance. The Spanish Inquisition was a constant terror. The phrase Spanish Inquisition conjures images of relentless, omnipresent force of terror and torture. While the Inquisition did indeed involve severe persecution, its scope and reach are often exaggerated. It primarily targeted specific groups such as conversos, Jewish converts to Christianity, and Protestants, rather than the general population. Furthermore, the Inquisition's activities were concentrated in particular regions and didn't affect everyone in Spain. The exaggerated fear and infamy of the Inquisition in popular culture are largely due to later historical accounts and dramatizations that emphasized its brutality. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." "Let them eat cake" is one of the most infamous quotes attributed to Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France during the French Revolution. The story goes that when told the peasants had no bread, she flippantly suggested they eat cake instead, symbolizing her disconnect from the struggles of the poor. However, there's no evidence she ever actually said this. The quote likely originated from an anecdote in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions, written when Marie Antoinette was just a child. Over time, it was misattributed to her, possibly as revolutionary propaganda, to paint her as out of touch and insensitive. Paul Revere's Midnight Ride was a solo mission. Paul Revere's Midnight Ride is a legendary moment in American history, immortalized by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem. According to popular belief, Revere rode alone to warn the colonists that the British are coming, the British are coming. However, Revere was not alone on his mission. Several other riders, including William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, were also involved in spreading the warning. Moreover, Revere was captured by British troops before completing his mission, while Prescott successfully reached Concord to deliver the alert. The story of Revere's solitary ride was a dramatic retelling that glossed over the collaborative effort involved. The myth of the Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is one of the most infamous torture devices in history, often depicted as a horrific metal sarcophagus lined with spikes on the inside, designed to impale victims when closed. But here's the twist. There's no evidence that Iron Maidens were used in medieval times or even existed back then. The idea of the Iron Maiden as a torture device likely emerged in the 18th century, created more as a myth than reality. Some historians believe it was part of a broader effort to exaggerate the brutality of medieval torture methods, perhaps for sensationalism or propaganda. These myths remind us that history is not just about what happened, but how stories are told and retold and sometimes distorted over time. By understanding the truth behind these myths, we're not only gain a clearer view of the past, but also learn to question the narratives we've been taught. So the next time you hear a familiar historical tale, take a moment to ask, what's the real story? Thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out some of our playlists. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and check out some of our playlists if you want to learn more.